All right, Roosevelt, thank you again for joining us today. I appreciate it.
No, pleasure.
Fantastic. We can get straight into the questions. So, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who is Roosevelt Sokhulu?
Sure. Roosevelt Sokhulu is a boy from Durban. Grew up there, and while based down in Durban, had a couple of jobs. I was an intern for one of the big ad agencies that had partnered up with some of the other big FMCG type companies and media companies. And from there, my first proper job was with independent newspapers. Would cut my teeth at Spar, and the reason why I mention that is obviously from a retailing perspective. I got my first opportunity in that respect, and also moved on to Engen, and plus subsequently to that, other oil companies.
Okay.
So been around the block a little bit.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And what drew you personally to the convenience retail side of your industry?
Very fortunate. I was very fortunate to, as I mentioned Spar earlier on, to have gotten my grounding in the retail space at Spar, where they had a number of different offers ranging from your quick Spar all the way to your super Spars and so on. And from that perspective, I learned a little bit of retail. And at that time, the convenience portion of the oil companies was just starting out. And a lot of, these expertise were not easily available. And a lot of people who got the ball rolling came out of places like Checkers, Spar, and Pick and Pay and so on, because they needed to be able to set the groundwork in the oil companies who didn't have this as expertise. A lot of the guys who were in the oil companies were engineers, and from that perspective. And so foraging into the retail space, convenience space, was something going to be very, very new to them.
Okay. And in your opinion, why is convenience such an important part of the retail fuel business in South Africa?
Convenience is becoming more and more, and has been over the last couple of years, becoming more and more essential. I think Engen was one of the first people to kind of formally recognize this and understand the fact that customers needed to be able to have an affinity to a particular brand, because the differences between the oil companies didn't really matter a lot to your average consumer, and as a result needed to find a reason and a way to differentiate but also give more to the customer. Mm-hmm. And as a result, that's where convenience has grown from, and it's about giving Mrs. Housewife more and more of a reason to go to a particular space or to a particular brand. And I learned a long time ago that the only reason why any oil company does what it does is to protect the fuel, because they're a fuel company.
Yes.
However, they need to find a reason for you to frequent them and to like them and to have brand love and to be a repeat customer.
Absolutely.
And that's why you then find all of these new things that are then added to the service stations, and giving you a more and more reason to have a better affinity to a particular brand.
Okay. And in the past, say, 10, 15 years, how has the space changed? Like 15 years ago, what was common then versus now? How has it changed?
I think the evolution has been a little bit longer than the last 10, 15 years. As I said earlier on, some 20, 25 years ago, these new convenience stores were starting to mushroom, and they put the mom and pop stores out of business. I mean, I don't know if any of your listeners and viewers would remember the tea room and the cafes that used to be around every street corner. All of those have now gone and either changed to something else. And the main reason for that is that the convenience stores have emerged, and they've become stronger and stronger, and the science behind it has become that much more in depth. So we're talking about layouts, we're talking about lighting, we're talking about supplier management, we're talking about adding to the convenience store and the service station and as a whole. We're talking about partnerships such as the Engen Woolworths scenario, which everybody I'm sure is aware of. We're talking about other partnerships such as, which are again very visible to most people, the Mug and Bean and Total synergies and so on that have happened in the past. So all of these things have now come into play and all form part of convenience and so on. So the evolution on it has been steady, has been, I think, pretty quick. And the question becomes, where does it stop? I think, some of the most interesting and best stores that you see around the country are trying to find innovative ways to make sure that not only do they appeal to you from a first choice perspective as to where you want to go, but also we don't want to waste the space, right? They can't have everything and be everything to everybody.
Right.
So it's critically important to be able to be working with your suppliers and be able to understand and manage them, make sure that you have the right range, the right products, and what it is that Mrs. Housewife and your average consumer is actually looking for.
Okay, makes sense. And convenience isn't just food. It could encompass other aspects such as ATMs, car washes, parcel pickups, or even Wi-Fi. When we talk about convenience at retail petrol stations, particularly in South Africa, if I don't know anything about, the retail space, how would you describe convenience besides obviously the QSRs and the shops?
That's a good question.
Perhaps petrol attendants, perhaps security.
Specifically looking at convenience? Specifically looking at convenience, it's about the things that you need to smoothen your day. Whether it's a question of starting your day with a cup of coffee that is an espresso cup of coffee as opposed to what it is that you might be keeping at home. Whether it's a place for you to be able to stop and make sure that you've got the essentials for the day. Whether it's a case of, have you made sandwiches for the kids, or can you pick up something on the way through to drop them off at school. It's about convenience and every aspect of that, whether it be from a parcel pickup that you're talking about, or whether it be the ability to be able to draw cash. So convenience is about what's going to streamline your life, what's going to make it easier, because we all live such hectic lives and we're all continuously running somewhere and chasing our tails. And so anything that helps to streamline that is usually going to be your winner.
Okay. And in your view, what does the future of convenience look like at a South African fuel petrol station?
My quick answer would be digital convergence.
Oh?
We live in a world that is very quickly, especially millennials, younger age groups, people like yourself, become exceptionally tech savvy and so on. The company that taps into that and is able to use it in the best possible way, and is able to harness that, it's about the digital convergence that I'm talking about is the ability for you to personalize things, the ability for you to be able to anticipate, the ability to be able to use the same mechanism either through your phone or whatever it is that you're using to be able to touch various different touch points, from your bank to filling up, the ability to not have to carry cash or a card. I think a few years ago, it was thought to be, miraculous, the fact that not having to pay the petrol attendant, but rather, use a phone to be able to do so. Now it's happening, it's everywhere, right?
Yes.
And so keeping ahead of that and being at the cutting edge of that is what's always going to continuously differentiate people. I think what's also interesting as well is that while from a technology perspective that is always exceptionally important, I think we're also finding other different aspects that we're not necessarily focused on, and I think that are coming through quite nicely. And I'm talking about things such as the ability to be able to sit down and be able to kind of meet at a point or at a place, specifically in this country.
Yeah.
There's a number of sites where they've become now meeting points and places where you can now take your girl and have a date at a petrol station.
Right, yeah. Fair enough. And what do you think makes the South African convenience retail market unique compared to other countries? Because it is quite unique, I'd say, in South Africa.
Without me knowing too many of the other different markets and obviously from a comparison perspective, what I do know is that a couple of years ago, Fresh Stop won a best convenience store in the world. That was about 10, 15 years ago. And if I look at what is it that they did over there by way of, from a range perspective, from a product and freshness perspective and so on. Convenience in this country is about range, but you've got to customize it. You've got to be able to understand your target market. I think one of the things that have been an interesting learning for me is convenience stores, for example, in the Eastern Cape do particularly well as compared to maybe the rest of the country, or rather they punch better in the Eastern Cape than what they would normally do in some of the other provinces. And the main reason for that is that convenience stores in the Eastern Cape tend to be a beacon in the community, an area that is not very well invested in by this government or has been in the past. However, they need to be able to find all the things that they need at a convenience store.
Right.
So hence you'll find that even if the literage might not be great at the forecourt, but their convenience numbers are usually fantastic.
Right.
So different to the rest of the world, I think we're at the cutting edge, and like I said to you, some 10, 15 years ago, we won best convenience store in the world. I think we've continued to grow from there. I think there's a number of different examples now that have shown what you can do and have moved the dial monumentally since then.
Yeah, makes sense. And you touched on this already in the previous question, but how does local culture, lifestyle, and travel habits shape what people expect from a petrol station?
I think it's about understanding your customer base. So, for example, being on a transient route, one of my favorite petrol stations is a petrol station in Bergview. Shan't mention the brand, but it's in Bergview. And one of the reasons why I enjoy it so much is the range of different offers that you could have. And literally, it's become one of the highlights to my trip down to Durban for my kids and I, because it's a question of, do we do Spirit today, or do we do Mug and Bean, or do we do Nando's, and so forth. So from that perspective, it gives great range, it gives better understanding to the traveling consumer. And again, it has all the things that you would want to be able to sit down to refresh. That's exceptionally important. If you tend to be more of a residential type of site, make sure that you have the type of products that speak to that. Okay, do you have things that are more for immediate consumption, such as Omo? You're not going to sell Omo in a transient site.
Yeah.
Okay, nobody's going to buy it.
Yeah. However,
you need maybe 2 or 3 different types of Omo or packagings of Omo in a residential site, because, and again, dependent on where you're situated. If you're in a higher LSM area, you need to have things that speak to that. Okay,
absolutely.
Understand your target market and be able to cater to them to the best of your ability.
Yes, 100%. And I'm glad you touched on Bergview. It was actually one of the questions I had. We shan't mention the name. But yes, everyone stops at the site on their way to Durban and Harry Smith. It's almost become a rite of passage for Joburgers driving down to Durban. Or
sure.
Why is it so popular? Everyone stops there. I've stopped there before.
Yeah.
It's very popular. What makes it so popular?
I think there's an interesting dynamic. If I don't answer you directly, I hope you don't mind. I think there's an interesting dynamic that's currently happening with all the different oil companies, and it's about how do they continuously show up differently and be able to mesmerize. So you talked about Bergview, and what makes it so amazing is that you can literally get a Wimpy and a McDonald's in the same vicinity. It's all squashed in together there. So there's absolutely choices for everyone, whether it be a mug and bean coffee or a Seattle coffee. But what I was alluding to earlier on is the differentiation that's happening between the different oil companies. There's another oil company that's got if you go up further north, instead of going towards Durban, where they've got a trout farm. So you could buy fish, and you could sit back and relax, and there's this bit of a lake, and you could feed the carp.
Wow, okay.
There's another one that's not too far from that one where they've got rhino. And I think the most interesting thing about that one is that the best view is out of the men's toilets, but they've got like a little gap that overlooks part of the back portion there. And while doing your business, you could be looking at the little rhino running around and so on. And I don't think anybody who's got any place has got that kind of offering.
Yeah, that's pretty unique to South Africa.
Correct, yeah.
Fantastic. And what products or services would you say are uniquely popular in South Africa at a convenience retail store?
Products and services.
Yeah. Something local, perhaps, that you've seen.
Sure, that's a bit of a tough one because I think there's a certain thread that is continuous all along. I think the one thing that everybody is always trying to make sure of is must have coffee. You're not a convenience store without coffee. Must have your range of different line items from your sweets, your chewing gums, and your cigarettes, and all that kind of stuff. So, from a differentiation perspective, I think I'm not going to be able to kind of pinpoint that one too easily. I think there's a lot of stuff that the similarities are very high, but the guys who get it right are the ones who are able to differentiate. I mean, and whether it be a case of you differentiating from a broader offer perspective, like I was talking about just now, being able to feed the carp and look at the rhino, to actually having your choice of different types of fast foods that are available out there. Yes, looking at the rhino doesn't talk to convenience. I'm aware of that. Sure. However, it does give you a reason to choose that particular spot because there's 101 other places where you could go to.
Yes. Yes.
Where that particular outlet where you can look at the rhino also has a Nando's and a couple of other things and so on. So it's not just a case of just they want to make sure that they trap you. They want to make sure that they give you what you need and a point of differentiation and something unique.
Makes sense. And I know safety is a big thing. A lot of people don't consider this, especially from perhaps a convenience point of view. But how does safety and security at a fuel station influence the way convenience is designed and delivered in South Africa, particularly with ATMs and bombings? Because that's a thing.
Sure. Great question. Safety and security, I think, is paramount and the first point for any oil company. And the main reason for that is obviously the fact that we work with hazardous materials in the form of fuel. I mean, and in the wrong hands, it's completely detrimental and so on. So we fully understand and embrace that. But we also understand that fuel stations also tend to be beacons in whichever communities that they are in. So lighting becomes a big thing. The fact that if somebody is following you, you could literally go to a service station where theoretically, and I'm not showing that it will happen this way, but theoretically, you should be able to get assistance. You should be able to, there's cameras, there's lighting, there's people that are around who either can help you or can help you to take that next step, or whatever that next step is. So from a security perspective, I think one of the other things that get overlooked, from a petrol station attendants, we run to a service station because we know it's going to have people there. We know that we should be able to talk to somebody in order to be able to get the assistance and help. From an ATM perspective, which you touched on directly, we are facing a bit of a scourge, a really, really bad one. And as far as I think we are winning the fight, by the way, just as bad as it sounds. And that talks to the ATM bombings that take place. It becomes soft targets. Criminals wanting to get direct access to money. But being a cash-rich country like South Africa is, we can't quite afford to move away from ATMs just yet. Yeah. I don't see us being cashless for a very long time, not while we still have spazas and selling on the sides of the roads and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So we'll continue to be a cash rich, and somebody needs to be able to either draw money or deposit money somewhere. So the design behind an ATM and where you place it, I think there's some very innovative new designs that are currently taking place. Working with companies like ATM Solutions, where retailers are able to deposit into the ATMs and be able to bank immediately. All of that stuff is all about safety and all about convenience and trying to make sure, because the convenience is not just just for the customer, but also for the people that own and that work there and so on.
That's true. And a while ago, I heard that they might be introducing sort of like an international ATM, one ATM that services all banks. I can imagine that could help in reducing the amount of ATMs and potential attacks.
Sure.
I'm not sure if that was a false bit of information I found.
No. Let me try and massage that for you a little bit. It's not necessarily false, but rather a situation where we're heading towards the ability to kind of white label it. Okay. And what that talks to is the different banks agreeing to filter all their money, because right now, as a Standard Bank customer, you look for a Standard Bank ATM. As an ABSA customer, you look for an ABSA ATM, because one, you know that there are charges that are involved when you're an ABSA customer going to a Standard Bank, and vice versa. So that for one. Number two, obviously, if that is your bank, you know that it should have the correct information about you and be able to access whatever it is that you need. So when you start to white label it, one, you've got trust issues that could possibly take place. Is it to coin a South African term, is it a Fong Kong ATM, or is it the real thing?
Right.
So all of those things kind of start becoming a little bit of an issue. And I think there's a lot of work that will need to take place between the banks in order for them to align, not to be branded and not to have that point of differentiation as individuals, because we all choose banks for whatever different reasons, right? Capitec is now becoming the fastest growing bank in the country because they've got a unique selling proposition, and they've gone and they've worked towards that, and people are choosing them, and they're taking people away from other traditional banks. So suddenly everybody is able to just funnel through one. I'm not really sure where that's going to take us to.
True, and I can imagine there's like a fine line, because when it comes to marketing at a petrol station, we hear a lot about loyalty programs.
Sure.
So once you white label an ATM, I'm sure consumers might think, do I still get my points at this ATM?
Exactly.
Or what happens?
Exactly.
So it's a thing of perhaps the marketing versus the security of the site. Do we white label it? How do we market?
Sure.
How do we market the site to get those Standard Bank customers, or whatever bank you might bank with, to come to our petrol station and get those points at the ATM? Exactly.
And I mean, you touched on loyalty. Loyalty is about, the only reason why loyalty as an entity, as a marketing thing exists, is to make sure that you move from one space to the next, and you stay with me because you become more loyal to me. So if I can offer you something that is slightly better, something different, or something that you're going to think is worthwhile, you're going to spend your money with me. Because in this crazy world, the way that capitalism works, it's about me extracting as much money as I can from you as an individual. Continuously. Obviously, you need to feel like you gotten the worth of it, right? So, I mean, it's not just about robbing you blind.
Yeah, of course. And I wanted to talk about one of the more unique petrol stations in the country, this being Sasol Pantry in Rosebank.
Sure.
What is the story behind Sasol Pantry? What makes it so unique? Explain it to me as if I've never been before, because it is quite a sight to see.
Interesting question. I don't work for Sasol, so I've got limited knowledge. However, I think what is common knowledge is the fact that they've done something that I don't think anybody else has done, which is handed over a convenience outlet to a top-tier chef. So everybody is well aware that David Higgs and his team are behind it. And David Higgs is one of the best-known chefs around the country, and he's got a number of different outlets, including the likes of the name disappears in my head.
Marble?
Marble, yes, sorry, yeah, just upstairs and so on.
Yes.
So places like that. So when you then offer that space to somebody who is all about food and presentation of food and to excite the senses and so on, you're going to have a winner, and I think that's what they've managed to do. However, I think he's also playing in a space that is probably quite unfamiliar and quite difficult maybe for him to be able to kind of fully get his head around, purely because I think the only thing that I'll say about Marble per se, I mean not Marble, but the pantry, for me it's a little bit too big from a convenience store perspective. It's fantastic. You've got this pizza oven on the one side and so on, but I've also seen things there that I would never sell as a person who's been in convenience for as long as I have.
Yeah, a bit of an overkill perhaps.
100%. Why would I be buying crockery at a convenience store?
Yeah.
Understanding the fact that the most popular and the best of these convenience stores are the ones that have fantastic customer patronage at 5 in the morning. When people are coming out of clubs and going to different places, coming from different places, they think of only one place. And this is, interestingly enough, I mean, it's happening now for the pantry and the likes of Rosebank, but that's what we used to see happening in the Woolies in Orania in Cape Town, where they used to do the bulk of their sales between 1 and 5 in the morning. Because they were situated at the end of Long Street, and Long Street, as you know, is the party central.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to get anything half decent, and they had pies and a couple of QSRs in there and so on. So from a food perspective, if you didn't like what it is, or you thought it was too expensive, or wherever the restaurant, wherever you are, or you just at a bar and you just need to have that quick pick me up or that garage pie before you get home.
Yes.
That was the place to stop, right?
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. And what would you say customers are asking for most when it comes to convenience at a fuel station, in your experience?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think it's digital integration. It's ease of doing business. It's I need to know. I think we're going to get to probably a point where I probably want to sit at home, play around with my phone. Know that by the time, if I'm heading to the club maybe, or heading back from the club, they've received my order, they've put it together, they know that it's me, for me to be able to pick up, have paid for it already, all of the things that come by with the ability to be able to just, from a smartphone perspective and so on, and the individualization that comes with.
Yes.
So yeah, I still continue to believe that the digital integration portion of it is what will set a lot of guys apart, and I think the more they take that on, I mean, obviously digital integration, the loyalty cards, all sorts of other things, it's all interlinked, from your bank to your loyalty to your health to 101 different things. And the more that you can get all of that and personalize it.
So I also wanted to ask, how has the likes of Checker 6060, your Uber Eats, delivery drivers impacted convenience? Because I feel as though, once the shops do close, right, the petrol stations are still open, which continues that line of I can order online from Uber Eats or Checker 6060 and still get it delivered, perhaps from the likes of a Steers that's open at an Engen for 24 hours, or a KFC. Yeah, could you touch on that for a bit?
Yeah, sure. I think you got to stick with the times. If you're not, you're going to get left behind, because essentially, while those brands, the Uber Eats of the world and so on, came about and became strongest at a time, or during the COVID time and so on, and everybody looks at them and the auspices of just food and restaurants and so on, but they have made sure that they increase their range and so on. So what's ended up happening is that convenience stores are now part of that, and if you need something from a convenience store, they're able to do that pickup and so on, and that channel has changed the way that business is done, especially from a convenience perspective, immensely. I think there still is a gap. I don't think that the oil companies have taken a stronger ownership on it as, say, maybe what the likes of the QSR portions and the food portions of it have done. Steers was delivering long before Uber Eats became a thing.
Yeah.
And the original innovators of that space are the pizza delivery guys and so on. So I think the question for the oil companies as to whether to kind of delve into that from an ownership perspective becomes negated by the fact that the Uber Eats of the world are omni into everything, all the different brands and so on.
Yeah.
But are the oil companies close enough to them? That's where I would question it, because I think it's become something that is wise to do as an individual retailer. You're sitting, you own a service station and so on, but I don't know if I see enough interaction between, say, for example, a Shell and an Uber Eats.
Right.
And I'm just using Shell. It could have been Astron, it could have been Engen.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe those discussions are happening.
Could be an opportunity there, though, nonetheless.
Yeah, I think there's the opportunity, yeah, definitely.
Fair enough, which kind of leads into the next question. If you had to sum up the biggest opportunity in convenience retail at South African petrol stations in one sentence, or a few, what would it be?
Yeah, as I think we've touched on already as part of the discussion, I think the digital integration plus from a delivery perspective and kind of mashing that up, whether that be to a point of delivering fuel. I don't think that ever happens, essentially, not to your house anyway, to being able to kind of get on to an Astron app, an Engen app, a Shell app, and be able to kind of have absolutely 101 all the different things that they would, and then be able to interlink that with health points, vitality, again, and all of this has got to do with the integration of that I've been talking about continuously, because I'm throwing in vitality, I'm throwing in the oil company, I'm throwing in the core product of fuel, I'm throwing in all of these different, and all of it being integrated. I think if someone gets that right, that could be very exciting.
Got it. Is that a digital innovation, essentially?
Correct, yeah.
Fair enough. And what excites you most about where convenience retail is heading in South Africa?
I think the evolution of it. The evolution and trying to understand what's next and who's going to be next. And so, you talked about the pantry earlier on. The pantry's been around for a couple of years now, and for the longest time, they were what I would imagine would be the most cutting edge to be able to see out there as an example. But I hear there's also a couple of new examples that have come in play. I think what's happening out in Rosebank, for example, is also exceptionally exciting. Very similar to the pantry, however, they're slightly more niche market. I think...
yes, this is the AE Rosebank.
Correct,
very similar
yeah.
to the pantry.
100%.
Almost a direct competitor, if I recall. They're 2 kilometers apart even.
Correct. But I think one of the things that has kind of managed to set them apart is they've gone big on seating. So you could, I think they could accommodate probably up to about 100 people.
Wow.
And from South Africa is a tapestry of a lot of different cultures and so on. So being a Muslim-run eatery has also had its definite strong points from bringing that into main play for them specifically. And I think I've seen videos where the forecourt looks completely overrun on a Saturday evening because that's where people are now hanging out, and you know, they can trust the food, they know what to expect, and so on. Culturally, it's got its downsides as well. So I've seen as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Perfect. And that concludes this interview. Thank you, Roosevelt, so much.
No, you're welcome. Thank you, sir.
Let me shake your hand.